I will be resigning as a member of the United States Senate.
We've seen accusations of sexual harassment lead to resignations on Capitol Hill. Now some Texas lawmakers also face calls to resign. Good morning and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. 2 Texas state senators face calls to resign after accusations of sexual assault and harassment. The accusations come in an article published by the Daily Beast. The article accused 2 Democrats, Senator Boris Miles from Houston and Senator Carlos Aresti from San Antonio. The articles contained detailed descriptions of alleged assaults and harassment by both men, but the article did not name the accusers, and both senators denied the accusations. Miles released a statement saying he would not address anonymous accusations. He blamed the allegations on powerful enemies he's made in his years at the Capitol. Aresti also said that he's innocent. He posted a Facebook photo of him having dinner with his wife at the same time when one of his accusers said he was behaving inappropriately at a Capitol party. Still, the accusations led one lawmaker to call for an independent investigation into the sexual assault and harassment claims. Senator Sylvia Garcia is also calling for a hotline for people to report abuse in Texas government. The accusations led the influential political group Annie's List to call for both Miles and Aresti to resign. Joining us now is the executive director of Annie's List, Patsy Woods Martin. Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure.
So both of these accusations against Miles and Aresti were anonymous. What made your group decide to call for them to resign?
So I spend my time going around the state recruiting women to run and serve in public office. And what we want for these women is for them to have a safe workplace. And we know that it's difficult for women to make these accusations, and at the same time, almost always they're true and accurate. And while I tend to be a moderation in all type of person, our organization is about workplace safety, and it is about taking care of victims of sexual assault and harassment. And sometimes actions like this call for strong action, and we feel like this is just that.
What did you think about the Lieutenant Governor coming out right after you guys did and calling for the same thing, their resignations?
I think that's wholly appropriate.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's these working groups at the Capitol right now in both chambers that are looking to deal with this issue and maybe revamp some of the policies. The House has already made some moves. The Senate is supposed to very soon. Do you think that they're doing enough, or should there be more beyond this working group?
You know, I think what we want is a change of culture, and the working group is a great first step, but I think we need to have folks take responsibility for their actions. This is a unique moment in time where women are feeling that they can stand up and call for change and let people know what's happened to them. So that's our hope, is that the culture will change, and these working groups are probably a good first step in that direction.
There's been talk of a list at the Capitol where women who have, been harassed or possibly assaulted, they have been able to warn other women about these men. Had your group ever heard about this before it started coming out in the media in recent weeks?
I had not heard about it before it came out in the media, but I think that's a great kind of quiet underground way for women to take care of one another. But the real problem is that the sexual harassment and assault is happening, and it needs to stop.
For those people that don't know too much about Annie's List, what does your group really do? What are your goals?
Our goals are to elect more pro-choice progressive women to office in the state of Texas. We spend our time recruiting women, raising money to invest in their campaigns, and helping them actually get elected to public office across the state.
With a mission like that, some people might ask, why is this group taking a stand on this specific topic?
Well, as I said earlier, I spend my time around the state recruiting women, telling them they need to get out there and run for office so that they can be elected and make a difference. And the idea of sending them into a workplace that is not safe or comfortable for them feels like the wrong thing to do. So this is a moment in time where we might be able to change the culture, and we need to stand up and call for that.
Both Miles and Aresti have in the past supported some of your group's causes, like abortion rights. Do you think calling for their resignations might hurt your group?
This is bigger than politics. They actually have both voted right on Annie's List issues, but what we would ask them to do is actually go beyond voting right and live those values.
Do you see this as a tipping point, the fact that so many women in Texas and across the nation are speaking out against men? Are we going to see any kind of big shift in the way that governments are, really governed?
We hope so. I mean, I worked in the Capitol in the late 70s, and there was a sexual harassment and assault going on then, but people didn't talk about it. People are standing up and talking about it, and that, I think, gives us the opportunity to actually shift and change that culture.
Thank you for bringing this issue, in the forefront even more. And thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
A packed primary just got a little more crowded. Now some new names could change the dynamics for Democrats in the race for governor.
They always call him brave boy and tough guy. And I know the doctors and nurses at the hospital have said that he's the toughest child they've ever seen.
A 5-year-old boy fights to recover after the shootings at a Texas church. We'll look closer at his recovery and how his family is moving forward. This week marked 1 month since a gunman opened fire in the Sutherland Springs Baptist Church. 5-year-old Ryland Ward is still in the hospital being treated for gunshot wounds. Christina Eckert has details on his recovery.
They always call him brave boy and tough guy. And I know the doctors and nurses at the hospital have said that he's the toughest child they've ever seen.
Sandy Stokes Ward knows her 5-year-old grandson Ryland is tough. He was shot 5 times at the Sutherland Springs First Baptist Church November 5th. Bullets shattered his femur, damaged his left arm, kidney, and bladder, and left a physical and emotional toll on him.
The only thing he's really said, he started remembering a little bit. All he said is something about a bad man with a gun that they had to hide from.
That bad man killed 26 people in church that Sunday morning and injured more than a dozen others. Ryland's sisters, Brooke and Emily, and his stepmother, Joanne, among those killed.
Well, Joanne, she was a great person. She had a lot of friends. She was one of my best friends. We and her were really good friends.
And this grandmother's grief for her granddaughters is unimaginable.
Emily was so sweet. She was, I always called her my little helper. Because if you needed her to help you do anything, she would. Brooke was our little ballerina. She'd go to church, and when we'd sing, she'd dance up and down the aisle. And
now, the church that was once a happy place is a heartbreaking reminder of what happened there.
That's when I miss the most, when I go to church, because I was, even before Joanne started going, we were taking them to church with us, me and my husband. And everybody always loved our grandbabies.
She continues to visit her other grandbaby, Ryland, at the hospital every single day, where his dad is constantly by his side. And the only solace they find in their grief during this holiday season is their faith.
I'd probably be a nervous wreck if I didn't have my faith. I'd probably fall apart if I didn't know that they're in heaven and that I'm going to see them again. And that's the thing that keeps me going, is just we miss them so much right now.
That was Christina Eckert reporting. On Tuesday, the Ward family filed a lawsuit over the shooting. Their wrongful death suit targets the Air Force for failing to tell the FBI about the criminal history of the gunman. After the shooting, the Air Force admitted it never reported his criminal record to the FBI. That allowed him to pass a criminal background check when he bought at least 4 firearms. The Wards are the 4th Sutherland Springs family to pursue a wrongful death claim against the Air Force.
I'm asking you to trust me with your state.
Some big changes this week in the race for Texas governor. How 2 new candidates could create a divide among Democrats at the polls. Some big developments in the race for Texas governor. Several new Democrats signed up to run, hoping to be the nominee to take on Republican Greg Abbott. At least 8 candidates will be on the ballot in the March primary, but 2 of them are drawing the most attention from party leaders. Lupe Valdez officially filed her paperwork on Wednesday. She's known for clashing with Governor Abbott over immigration issues. Valdez is the first Hispanic female sheriff in Texas, elected in 2004, Dallas County. Many people believe her main challenger is Andrew White. He announced his candidacy on Thursday. The Houston businessman is the son of the late former Governor Mark White. The race could split Democrats in the primary. Phil Prazen takes a closer look.
This week, we'll see a battle between those who want a more progressive future.
That's what Lupe Valdez is embracing today. It was refreshing to see it.
And those who want to go back to a more moderate but more successful past.
We need leaders who care, who use common sense.
But whoever can get support of organized labor, the Hispanic political network, and the African American community will win the primary, says David Butts. He's worked inside Democratic campaigns for nearly 50 years.
Sort of like the insiders, shall we say. They're going to be talking about who's our best choice.
In other words, the political activists who show up rain or shine will galvanize around one candidate, and then use their money and volunteers to convince the rest of the party a particular candidate can win.
Whatever group they are, white, black, brown, Asian, and tell them I'm your best chance.
But says that will probably tip in favor of Valdez. President Trump, he says, has pumped energy into the liberal wing of the Democratic Party, and that will show up in March.
So it's not solely dictated by the candidates so much as it is by that blonde-headed guy in the White House.
But whoever wins in the primary will take on Governor Abbott and his $40 million campaign account in November.
Governor of the great state of Texas.
For State of Texas, I'm Phil Prazen.
For Perspective, we're joined by Mike Ward, the Austin Bureau Chief for the Houston Chronicle, and Patrick Svitek, primary political correspondent for the Texas Tribune. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
So a couple of big announcements this week when we're talking about the governor's race. Lupe Valdez from up north and Andrew White also getting into that race. Do either of them have a chance, really?
They both face very long odds. Obviously, Texans have not elected a Democrat to statewide office in over 2 decades. Governor Abbott, he's seeking a second term next year, has more than $40 million in the bank. He doesn't seem to have any serious primary opposition. And so, unseating him is going to be a very steep climb for really any candidate, regardless of how prominent or recognizable they are.
With Lupe Valdez having, her sheriff background and, a lot of support from that law enforcement community, seemingly, then the Dallas Police Association comes out and endorses Governor Greg Abbott. What's that about?
Well, she's got better cred with a lot of the Democratic base than White does, mainly because White is billing himself as a conservative, common-sense Texan. Anytime you use the word conservative with the Democratic base, there's going to be a lot of questions. He's had a pro-life position in the past. That's not going to go over well with a lot of the Democratic base, a lot of these people who have been out showing up to the legislature on abortion issues and things. So what the bottom line is going to be is that they're going to have to get through the primary. One of them's going to have to get through a primary, maybe a runoff, but definitely get to the position where they can face Abbott in the fall.
And while she's kind of immediately getting this front-runner billing, Sheriff Valdez, we still don't know as of Friday too much about her campaign, honestly. She had a very low-key rollout, came to the Texas Democratic Party headquarters in Austin, filed, gave some very brief prepared remarks, took just a few questions, got out of there. Right now her website is just 1 page, and so I think just by virtue of her being a longtime elected official from such a large county and having a political history there, she's the front runner. But we're still kind of waiting to see what kind of campaign she's going to run, what her primary message is going to be and what specific issues she's going to run on.
The hope of the Democrats is that they can use Lupe Valdez, Hispanic, to energize this huge Hispanic population in Texas to turn out and vote for Democrats. And so that'll be one of the interesting things to watch as we move forward through this election cycle, is to see if that happens.
And it helps to have her at the top of the ticket in Dallas County, where the Democrats have a lot of down ballot races in 2018 that are very winnable for them.
Well, in the State House, there have been a lot of people that say they're stepping down in recent weeks. I think 8 of the 9 recent ones were Republicans. You know, does this give Democrats a chance to make any footholds in that chamber?
Sure. Anytime there's a turnover, there's a power of incumbency. Anytime an incumbent steps out, there's opportunity. Remember, though, that Texas has a long pattern of voting for Republicans, red state, and the general conventional wisdom has been for some time that the Democrats are going to win more and more seats, local level, state legislative level, and then come back up to where they can win some statewide posts. That said, is this the year for that? Who knows? A lot of the rules and politics kind of went out the window with Trump's election, and so that's why a lot of people are thinking anything could happen.
Yeah. I don't know the exact number, but we have somewhere in the range of a dozen State House members who aren't returning, mostly Republicans, in 2018. If you just look at the numbers, I'd say maybe just a few of those seats are really in play for the Democrats, but they do provide some real pickup opportunities in those few seats.
Some of the people that have said they're stepping down are actually going to try to go for a higher office, like Lance Gooden and Jason Isaac, both running for Congress. Do you think that is a good move for them, or should they stay where they are?
Well, the stakes can be high. You're obviously giving up your state house seat, and you're jumping into, at this point, a lot of these open seat congressional races in Texas are very jumbled and uncertain, and there are no immediate front runners. Even the state reps who are getting into them aren't exactly emerging right away as the front runners. For example, State Representative Jason Isaac, you mentioned, he's from Dripping Springs. He got into the race to replace Lamar Smith, San Antonio Republican, who's retiring from Congress. There are already over a dozen Republicans in that race. Jason Isaac may be one of the more prominent ones, but victory is not at all guaranteed at this point for him, so there is some risk to it.
And Chip Roy, who has some strong ties to Ted Cruz, he's in that race as well.
Right, he's a former chief of staff to Ted Cruz and a former kind of top staffer to a number of Texas Republicans. He got in the race this week, and he immediately secured the endorsement of his former boss, Senator Cruz, and so I think he'll be running in a very specific lane in that primary as kind of the constitutional conservative, the Ted Cruz-backed guy.
Speaking of people that have been, in the talk of maybe stepping down, Boris Miles and Carlos Uresti, after they have these sexual harassment allegations against them. They have not said they're stepping down yet, but, with the lieutenant governor calling for them to do just that, who knows what's going to happen.
Lieutenant governor's Republican, they're Democrats, do the math. The sexual harassment stuff, not only the allegations in Austin, but also in Washington, it's serious business. This is a workplace issue. Sexual harassment should not happen. There's a lot of turnover, frankly, in Congress and in Washington of seats because of this. And the general sense is that this is probably going to come down to the state level here pretty soon. There's a lot of turnover this year, politically. Mm-hmm. And so anytime you start shuffling the deck, there's a lot of things that could change. But one of the bottom lines on the sexual harassment is it's something that should not be tolerated, should not be happening.
Yeah, I agree with Mike about Dan Patrick's statement. Obviously not always remarkable when a Republican calls on a Democrat or Democrats to step down. But what I did think was striking this week was Annie's List, which is a group that helps elect Democratic women to office in Texas. They came out and they said, Senator Miles and Senator Uresti, you need to step down after these allegations, calling on their fellow Democrats within their party to step aside. And they were actually very specific, I think, and said, make way for female leadership. And so I think that was more remarkable, and that could be a breaking point. It could just be something we look back on as just one group speaking out. But up until that point, I don't think a lot of Democrats, Texas Democrats within the party, were talking about the possibility, at least publicly, of these men resigning.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think it's also interesting because those two senators had voted with Annie's List on quite a number of issues. So I'm pretty sure they're probably asking themselves, what the heck?
Yeah, we had the executive director of that group on earlier, and she said the Capitol should be a safe environment for women to be there as leaders. Is this just the first of it? Do you think we will see more?
Sure.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, just the environment we're at the national level and increasingly at the state level, I think is making people who may have not disclosed these situations in the past, making them more willing to step forward and even put their name on some of the allegations. I know in the Daily Beast story it was anonymous, but I feel like we can even have people coming forward, naming themselves and being very public about it. It's a very encouraging environment right now for these people.
This is part of a national discussion that's going on. It's a national dialogue over sexual harassment, not just in government, but also in entertainment, everywhere. And it's a very important dialogue that's going on, and I think that playing this forward, it's going to go on for a while. There's going to be some things we don't expect happen out of this, and the bottom line is that sexual harassment should not occur anywhere, either way, anytime.
All right. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
We are here to lend our support to those who were impacted by Hurricane Harvey.
First Lady Melania Trump meets with hurricane victims, but she surprised some folks when she stopped for lunch. Why her choice of a Texas favorite earned praise from the press corps and Governor Abbott. First Lady Melania Trump and Second Lady Karen Pence spent Wednesday in Texas offering support to people impacted by Hurricane Harvey. They met with first responders and survivors in Corpus Christi and Rockport, where the storm made landfall in August. The two women met with students at a local elementary school. They also stopped at a food bank to help sort donations. Before leaving Corpus Christi, the First Lady stopped at Whataburger. She even bought lunch for reporters in the press van. Governor Abbott said the lunch stop shows that the First Lady is, quote, Texas savvy. A pair of Houston sports stars are being honored for their efforts to help people recover after Hurricane Harvey. Houston Texans defensive end J.J. Watt was named Sports Illustrated's Co-Sportsperson of the Year, along with Houston Astros second baseman Jose Altuve. The two were recognized for their fundraising efforts after Harvey hit the Houston area. Watt appeared on The Tonight Show, where he talked about the award.
It's unbelievable. I mean, I think this award, I mean, it's Sports Person of the Year, but I think Jose and I would both tell you that it's much more than just two people. It's the whole city. And on my side, it's over 200,000 people who donated money to help rebuild the city. So it's an award that's so much bigger than sports.
Watt raised close to $37 million for hurricane relief efforts. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. Stay tuned for Meet the Press coming up at 9. I'm Josh Hinkle. Have a great day.